Hey there, it's Robin from Santa Fe, Tennessee. I'm going to create for you today a piece that I had to have courage to go on this journey. I'm using Shawn's dictionary page stencil as well as her bicycle 55 stencil and her bricks and bubbles stencil, and finally the little flower status, which is one of the newer ones. I'm using this Ranger journal that I've had for quite some time. I've got Master's Touch Antique Gold. It has a little iridescence to it. Master's Touch also Ocean Green. I loved this palette when I put it together. Liquitex Cobalt Blue, one of my very favorite colors. And then finally, or not finally, but second to last in the Vibrant, Winsor & Newton Cad Orange. It's a transparent paint, which I love. And then the golden titanium white. I like to squirt out my titanium in a little bit of a tube effect so that I can mix it with different colors. I'm going to set my paint palette aside and then work on the words. Courage is being afraid and going on the journey anyway. It's a quote I found that I loved by John Wayne, and Shawn's dictionary page happened to have two of those words in it, courage and journey. So I'm using a pigment ink on tracing paper. I used different fonts on my computer and printed that out on tracing paper, and then I'm using the stencil and the pigment ink on the same tracing paper. The word journey had a slash in it, / like dictionaries do. And so I just taped over that so I could remove it because it didn't fit with the picture I was going with. And so I just pieced the two parts of the word together. I did spray that with a workable fixative and let that dry before I applied it to my piece. This is my Ranger journal. I've had it for 6 months. I couldn't wait to get it. It was on back order and I've been afraid to use it. And so I used this quote from John Wayne and Shawn's stencils to inspire me to break into my pristine journal. I'm using that palette of Cobalt Blue, Ocean Green, Cad Orange, Antique Gold, and Titanium White to paint on the background of my page. I love these colors together. I love the transparency of the Cad Orange. I hate where this is going. And my worst fear is realized. I'm going to create something I don't like on the first page in the journal I've been saving for 6 months. So what do? I fast forward through a lot of this video so you can see how it ends up. I tried adding white. I tried doing everything. It's not working. Tempera paint. I do the swirl. It's one of the 5 basic shapes of art. You'll have to look at another video to find out where that came from. But tempera paint, I love it. It's not as opaque as acrylic. It is very fluid. And you can see I've got another piece of paper underneath the page I'm working on. And that's because if you paint in a journal like this, and the paint bleeds over, which it will, your pages will stick together. And so it's wise to either wax paper, or I've just got a piece of copy paper here to separate the pages and keep them not pristine, but at least dry between coats. So now I'm taking a large brush and I'm pulling back some of that tempera paint and exposing the original colors I had on the background, because I want to maintain my palette. I want to keep those colors in the piece. So I let that completely dry, and there's what I'm left with. It's a little darker, acrylics dry darker, watercolors dry lighter. Now I'm using the Bicycle 55 stencil from Shawn. You can see I've got that white piece of paper. It's actually taped to the stencil, and I've got some other parts of the stencil taped off, and that's because I don't want my haphazardness of stamping to accidentally get this high flow acrylic onto the other parts of my journal. I'm stamping a high flow carbon black from Golden on the page. And so I'm just keep stamping it. It's a makeup sponge that I use, and some of it bleeds a little bit, but that's okay because that's the beauty of using stencils. And you'll see, I'm going to lift that up, and then you'll see the back where I just taped on that scrap paper to the back of the stencil. So there's my bike, but it's floating. So now I'm going to use the Bricks and Bubbles stencil from Shawn to ground my bicycle. When I was showing this concept to my husband, he was like, you need the yellow brick road. It's got to be the yellow brick road. So I had this antique gold paint that was gifted to me from another art instructor, and I'm using it to stamp out some bricks underneath the bicycle. If I had it in hindsight, I would have added some modeling paste to that gold paint and to have some more texture to this part of the piece. But I did use this gold paint quite thick, in a thick manner, so there is a little bit of texture, just not as much as I would have done, say it was on a canvas. And so I just randomly move the stencil around and use the antique gold paint with a heavy hand to create a floor underneath my bicycle because it needs to have some grounding to it. The next phase in this is to add something to the basket. I'm going to use the Little Flowers Status to put just a few florals in the basket. I'm going to keep to my original palette because I loved it, and I'm going to use that orange, cat orange from Winsor Newton to add a few flowers to the basket. I'm just, again, the makeup sponge works great. You can get those at the dollar store, I don't know, 16 to a pack for $1, and you can wash them out. So we'll address those flowers later and add some depth to them, and then add some dimension to the basket. From here, I go to adding the words. I cut each word out separate. I'm going to use a matte gel medium to adhere them to the page. I found when I was placing the words on the page, I kept, from top down, I kept running into the bricks. So I thought the best approach was to work from the bottom up. So that's why you see me applying the matte gel medium and the words from the bottom up. You put the matte gel medium, you can also use Mod Podge, on your canvas or paper or whatever substrate you have. Apply the word and then coat it on top with the medium. You can see, because I applied that workable fixative, the words journey and courage, as well as the words that were printed on my printer, are not bleeding. And that's because I applied that fixative. I keep working my way up. And another tip is, because I used different fonts for different words, there was no straight line needed for aligning everything. But if you want to do that, just use a ruler, a light pencil line, and work that into your composition. And as you can see, it worked out. I had room at the top for the courage. And then I'm just applying a little bit of matte gel medium over everything to make sure it's adhered. That anyway is crooked and it drives me crazy to today, but done. Perfect is done. Now I'm going to use some acrylic gesso and the stencil again, the little flower status, to push back the background and just to repeat a pattern to the viewer. And so I'm using gesso because it is a light coat. It is not in your face like the orange is in the basket. But I'm using that same pattern because it's important for your viewer to have a repeat. And I'm going to even use it over the words, over the bricks. And gesso is very thin. And so you'll see me clean off the back of my stencil like right now. I'm cleaning off the back of the stencil. I'm just using a baby wipe or a paper towel to wipe off some of the paint. And you can, don't be afraid. You can turn your stencil over. The bicycle might not be facing the right way on the piece you want to use. So turn your stencil over. Both sides of the stencil work. And I did that with the status. So here I'm just pushing back the bricks a little bit with using the same method, just a little white on top of the bricks. Now I felt like the bricks were not dimensional because again, I would have used modeling paste, but even if I used modeling paste, I still would have done this step. And it's a water soluble charcoal pencil by Stabilo. And I felt my light source was coming from the top left, which is where the bicycle is going. I was riding my bicycle to the light. And so all the shadows on the bricks would have been to the right and to the bottom. And so I just took my pencil and did a light line on not all, but most of the bricks, and then a very thin brush with some water to activate the pencil. Now, you'll see as I speed this up, I went overboard on the pencil. And so I needed to bring back some of the color to the bricks and some of the background to my piece. So how I did that was I just finished using my pencil, finish one step, and then start the next. If you feel like you're going overboard, don't try to fix spot by spot. Finish what you've started, and then come back and take away what you feel like is overdone. Now I'm working on the basket of flowers. I've got the cad yellow. My coreopsis are blooming in my wildflower garden, as are the marigolds. And so that inspired me with the orange and yellow. So I'm adding orange and yellow. I'm adding yellow dots to the orange flowers that I previously did with the stencil. And I'm adding white dots. And then it obviously needs some greenery. So I mixed the cobalt blue with the yellow. And then you want depth. All the leaves are not the same color, so more cobalt blue to make deeper green leaves. And then nothing can be finished without splatters. High flow acrylic, the black and the white. I used both of those. If you don't have high flow acrylics, it's fine. Water down your regular acrylics. Dip your brush. A round brush works best. Dip the brush in the paint, and then I tap it on my index finger of my other hand, and that's how I make the splatters. But I think it added even more depth to the bricks. And now I'm adding, again, the water-soluble pencil to add a vignette to the edges. And so I add some water with my fingers, and then I push that back with a little more watered down paint. And then here I have my first page. In my journal, courage is being afraid and going on the journey anyway. I went on this journey. I am happy I did it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Follow me at chestnutgrovestudios.com.